quick hello. Hello, Anna. Hello, Laura. Hello, Peter.
Hello,
Stefan. Hello, Kenneth. Michael.
Hi, everyone.
Ben Wilder, James Bourne, Kate Alexander, Peter Lewis. Good. And a few more joining us any minute, I know. Okay. But we can't wait for all of those. So let's get things moving. Here we go. And we're into an iCloud Drive now. There we go. That's the It's a Rat Race title slide. That happens to be Mr. Warren Kendall, who is really not hiking very well. That bum should be much further over the side of that dinghy there. So for a moment, let's have a little virtual background up just to get the video looking good. There we go. Okay, onwards and upwards. So first of all, I think I'm going to change my hats, everyone. It's been a really hot day, so off comes the sou'wester, and on comes the sun hat. Bit of Henry Lloyd today to get things moving. Beautiful day out there. Shame we can't sail in it, but let's see what we can do with a little comment on race starts today. So those of you that were here last week, I gave some rules. And I said, please try and keep the questions to the end. What was successful, though, was in the chat, which I think is under participants, you get a chance to chat. It's very good, actually. Anna and Ben fielded questions, especially nice ones from Louise Beaumont, some dodgy ones from Rubina, but it means that they get the chance then to answer them at the end. And that is proving more successful than emailing questions. So that's a good one. If you've got any questions all the way through, and I haven't let you cut in, please do use the chat button. Okay, moving on from basic rules, and I think you all got quite a lot of that last week. Those who weren't here with us, yeah, pain in the neck. You will have missed a few of the basic rules. But if we go to a little PowerPoint here, thing that I've made up, there's a lot of them. I'm not going to go through these in detail now. What proved really successful again last week was questions about the basic rules, and I think that things like proper course came up, and they were so interesting that they started to take over and cut down our time. Now, whilst we go around our triangular course, we will get to all of these little rules, and we may do a whole session on proper course, overlapping, breaking, overlapping, overlaps. So we'll gloss over this lot at the moment. We all know that the port tack boat has to keep clear and of a starboard tack, which is the stand-on. Windward keeps clear of a leeward boat. Same tack overlapped boats astern have to keep clear. Obviously that doesn't work with different tacks. So, sorry, same tack not overlapped boat astern keeps clear. If we've got different tacks, well, of course, the port tack has to keep clear of the starboard tack, which is bottom left there. The bottom right 4 boat lengths is wrong. It's an old slide, and we're going to get to that once we get round our course. We haven't hit the upwind mark or the downwind marks yet. So let's move on to the next slide. Now we'll keep the barge in at the start away for now, and we'll go back to just a virtual background. All right. What I'm going to try and do is go around the course. Race starts. Now the first part is my views on it, my thoughts and how I approach a race, whether it be in the Solent or on the river. So we'll go with my thoughts to start, and then we'll get the proper ideas and the way to do it from the experts. So what do we want? Why is the race start so important? We need to get to the upwind mark first. Simple as that, as far as I'm concerned. So that's why, given equal boats, equipment, sails, etc., and skills on the boat, you'll see that the start is paramount, absolutely paramount. Now, it depends on the race, and for that, I'll say, if you look at the Cows Week series, if you look at all the winter, spring series that are raced in the Solent, the Sunsail series included, and our own points series on the river, if you're going to look at the starts on those, because they're regattas and a series, I tend to go for a solid, good start. If you've got a one-off cup race, for instance, on the river, you want a great start. But I would rather have 6 out of 6 solid-ish good starts than 3 complete cock-ups and 3 great starts. So depending on which race you're going, that's my way of approaching a race start. Oh, that's better. Bit of bright sunshine coming in. So 6 solid starts. So what are we going to look at? What are the most important things to think about with race starts? Let's have a look at our strategy. Now, again, I mentioned it last time, and those who missed it, be damned. I'm actually surprised that people like the Commodore and the Vice Commodore aren't on these chats yet. They haven't chimed in because they're the ones who don't know the rules and need it most. Also, most laser sailors, I'd encourage them to attend. So the strategy I mentioned, as opposed to tactics, strategy, how are we going to sail that course, given the wind, weather, tidal conditions of the day? So when do you start looking at that? Obviously, before you get down there, before you get to the race course, you've got ideal opportunities to look at what the weather's doing. A lot of weather sites might say, well, the wind is going to change at 2 o'clock. So you're getting ready for a shift in the wind. So you can start looking at the tides, wherever you are. Obviously on the river, we sail for 2 hours up to high water, so that tide is always coming in. But have we had a lot of rain? Therefore, is it very slow? Have we had no rain? So therefore, it changes, everything changes. So you can prepare well before you even get down to the race course. When you're at the race course, and get there early, I think, is the next piece of advice. Something I try to do, although I end up rigging lasers or trying to drag people out the bars in Cows or sober them up before we get across to the start line. But get out to the race course early, because things are changing and different out there. You've got to look at the course. Even before you get on your boat, have a look at what it says to you for the day, because those weather forecasters mostly need a bigger bloody window to look out of, and they quite often get it wrong. So there we are. We're down at the course. We've had a look out, having a look up the Thames. Yeah, the river's going like hell. There's a lot of rowers out. That's another little consideration when we're racing. What do we need to do next? So your checklists. How do you sail the course according to the conditions? Then really all you need, once you've got that strategy worked out, is your boat, a watch to time it, and then you probably get to bias. How's this course starting line biased? How is it going to help us consider the consideration of where to start on that line? We're getting there now. So if the sailing experts can unmute yourselves, or I think you're all unmuted actually, I haven't bothered muting you because you've all been very good. What have I missed out there? Anyone want to come in there on the sailing experts? Any questions so far?
Did you say bias, Gareth?
Yeah, so we're about to get on to bias and how we work out on where we are, where we want to start on the line. We're going into that quite in a moment. Mm-hmm. My priorities, keeping it very, very simple, are: number one is to sail as fast as I can over that line. I need to hit that line as fast as I can, bearing in mind I need clear air. Okay, so I'm looking at speed and clear air as number one. Clear air for me has always been king. It's all right starting at the favoured end, but I put that 3 on my priorities because down at that favoured end, there's probably boarding parties, swearing going on, and people trying to smash your boat up. It's carnage down there. So number 1 is always clear air and hitting the line as fast as possible. Number 2 for me is get into the favoured side of the course quickly. Now that means if I think there's a wind shift coming, I need to get across to it. If the tide is less on the right-hand side, I need to get over there if I'm going upwind, if the tide's against me. So simple priorities. Mine are number 1, clear airspeed, favoured side of the course, and then probably only number 3 is starting at the favoured end, because you can get into a complete mess at that favoured end. Much better to have a solid start in the middle with clear air than to get down there. Okay, Michael, have we got you on board? Let's ask you a quick question, because I've always seen you start on starboard or try to start on starboard and control that side of the course. Have we got you on, Mike?
Yes.
So why starboard? Let me ask you a quick question there.
Well, I guess if you go back to the kind of most basic rule, any boat on starboard tack has right of way over one on port tack. So when you start the race, you're obviously in close proximity to all the other boats. So if you try and start on port, you're going to have to give way to lots of other boats. So it's just one less thing to think about, really. So starting on a starboard tack means that you don't have to worry about the boats coming across on port because they've got to give way to you.
Yeah, and has anybody got any thoughts here? Perhaps Ben, Mike, anyone jump in with, if you started on the starboard, why do you try and control that right-hand side of the race course up to that mark? So we've got a start line, and somewhere up the course, we've got an upwind mark. Why again do you, because I noticed you again in the J80s, really trying to control the right-hand side of that course?
I guess, again, it depends on what you want to do. So particularly on a very short course, if you're, when you approach that top mark of the course, again, you don't want to be coming into that top mark on port tack. So if you're slightly towards the right-hand side, that means you can again have right of way of the boats on the left-hand side of the course. So it's just about where you want to be in relation to other boats.
Absolutely. So you've got the right of way at that top end mark and you've controlled it. So if you're sailing towards that mark, you can stop them tacking across you. Yeah, you're going to get there first, even if you pass the ley line and ball away. So I will draw a few little diagrams in a minute, although I'm looking for my pen. Here we go. There. Okay, so virtual backgrounds come back up. Oh, that's scary. Now I've got myself full screen. Not sure I like that too much. So depending on where you are, what the race course is, if I was to say that generally our Cows Week, Spring and Winter Series down in the Soul, they will all try their very best to set a line that's at right angles to the wind. Yeah, and so there's no bias on the course, on the start line. Where the upwind mark is. Now there's that interesting. I think before I go on there, I'm going to just pop back to one of the rules that we didn't actually get to last week. Here we go. And let's see if it's coming up. We'll whiz through to it. Let's just talk about this one quickly, because this is, I'm trying to introduce rules as we go along, as well as tactics and strategy. So we talked about the windward boat having to keep clear, okay? The leeward boat in this instance are the green boats. That's obviously my boat, and then there's Rory in the red boat again. Sorry, the Scottish plumber, I wasn't meant to mention names. Just a change in, so this is something that isn't in your collision regs, because this is particular to racing. So what you'll see here is the leeward boat has the right of way at the start, but is allowed to sail above her proper course in this instant to shut out any boat heading to the start before the start signal. So as you can see on the left-hand side there, the green boat has luffed up to point more at RC, which is the race committee boat. So it's shut out the red boat. You can do that on the start line. So there's something to remember there. There's a good little tip there. Basically, any boat to leeward you can potentially hit should be considered a brick wall. You cannot turn away, bear away, and hit a boat that's down below you to leeward. So this is on the race start. Yes, on the other one, on the other image on the right, boat A is luffed up the red. That's the Scottish plumber, and that's gone head to wind and over the start line early. It has left a gap there though for boat B, green B, reaching in. So a couple of little things that are changes to the normal collision regs. These are racing rules of sailing now. If you've got any questions on that, keep them or type them over to us. That would be absolutely fine. Back to, let's go have a little look at bias. So anything from any of the other guys that want to come in there before I go into showing ways of working out the bias on the line?
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah, of course you can, Anna.
If you're a leeward boat and you're luffing someone above you,
yeah,
you can't luff them past head to wind.
You can't push them past head to wind. No.
And that basically is your windward boat's only tactic, basically, when you're on the start line.
Okay.
To basically scream like a banshee if they're putting you anywhere close to head to wind.
Good.
And they're absolutely not allowed to do that.
Okay, and also I think it's rule 16.1 for all the purists out there, that if you are luffing them up, you cannot hit them. You can't hit them. You've got to give them time to get out of the way. I've got some slides that will be quite interesting just at the end, which should give us some talking points on those, Anna. But yeah, okay.
Like you can hit them, but only if you have given them time and they haven't moved.
Yeah, and then you've got to be a bit careful about avoiding collisions at all times. There is another rule that comes in. Yeah, stick your hand out, push them away. Try not to push them backwards. That's not good.
Oh, no. Definitely don't touch them. When I was about 8 years old, no, kind of only 8, maybe 10 years old, I ended I can't remember where I was. I think I might have been in Italy or France or something. One of the sailing boats I've sort of towed behind my sister, so I was too young to be there. And I was coming last all the time in all the races. And then there was one race where I was mid-fleet and I got stacked up and some horrible boy grabbed my oppie and pulled me backwards. And I had to do the last beat in tears and came in and I was so upset. My mum marched me to the protest room. It was my first ever protest.
Did you win?
I did win. He got disqualified and disqualified, not discardable. So it was like he was in big trouble.
What would have happened had he grabbed you and pushed you forward? Would that have been all right?
No.
You've still been in tears. But
well, it depends if I come out of it better or worse. But I remember the trauma of that.
All right, I'm gonna chuck a couple of little slides in now. So, bias. How do we do the bias? How do we look at bias? So I'm going to always draw a pin end of the line and a committee boat end of the line, and it depends on where that line will come across, usually where there's a flag. It might be on the front, but that's our flag there for now. It's an upside down flag. So if you can see that there, most people will try, as we've said, to have the wind coming down here, right down the middle. So we're at right angles to the winds. Okay, there's a bit of a Chinese drawing here, but there you go. Should that be the case, let me just ask you a quick question. What happens if our top mark is over there? Anybody know whether starting on the right or the left is going to be quicker to get there? So should this boat start here? Let's draw one there. Obviously on starboard, and one here on starboard. Which boat is going to get to that mark first, or neither? Or A, let's say that's A, which is usually me, and that's the Scottish plumber. He's on B. So you,
B.
yeah? B?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any A's? No A's out there? Any both at the same times? Okay, so the distance, I'm going to try and draw this accurately. The distance to that mark there, not a very good, oh, it's disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody see why that disappeared? Okay, I must have pressed something. A very quick drawing again. Sorry, guys. Here we go. Marks there, but the wind is perpendicular, sorry, at right angles to the line, as we've drawn there. So that distance, say that boat there, A, goes up there and tacks. B sails that. It's exactly the same distance. Same distance. So I don't know why I'm reverberating now. Have you all got a reverb on it?
Yeah, it's reverbing.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not sure why that's happening. Can you hear me now?
You're better now.
That's okay.
Okay, it's gone. So that is exactly the same distance, albeit A has to tack.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, maybe be a bit slower to get to that mark. And even if they're a bit slower getting to the mark, then that's one thing. If they sail faster than B, also B gets to that mark on starboard, whereas they're on port at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So B is probably just the better position, but interestingly enough, it doesn't matter where that mark is, it could be over here. If that wind is perpendicular to the court, to the, at right angles, then it's exactly the same distance. So let's have one quick look at, again here, where we can draw. Lost my pen. There we go, pin end. And about, there's your start line. And of course, we'll take out the wind.
Mm-hmm.
Put it back in where the wind is now here. Now, I've probably shown that most race officers won't have such a bias with the wind to the start line, but it does happen. Okay, so now, of course, we've got a different scenario. It's all about the wind, really, not the top mark, is what I'm trying to get across here. If obviously now, if the mark's there, let's see how I can describe this best. Now, if they're sailing up to that mark, what happens? Now, some people when they draw this, they kind of draw a ladder at right angles again to the wind. So boat A and boat B, which one is now closer to that mark? There's the ladder they've got to climb
B.
to get to that mark. A and B. Well, B is on this rung of the ladder. A is 2 rungs further down. That's the way a lot of people try and explain it. Okay, I could have drawn it like this, pin end, boat, and your mark as so your wind now is coming down here, straight down the course. That's where they've set a course that's not at right angles to the wind, and they do have trouble, especially out in the Solent. The wind's shifting all the time. They're waiting for it to try and before they set the course. So if I say, here's my boat's going off the line, this one is obviously closer than that one who's got to go like that. Okay, call him. I do it, and when you get a bit more experience, you look at wind shifts, and that ladder thing sometimes helps to explain it to people. Sometimes it doesn't. So choosing the bias on the line. How are we going to do it? Here's your line. Committee boat end. Everyone's got that, have they? That's the committee boat. And they call this the pin end quite often. Okay. I mean, this race starts thing will probably be 3 sessions, because we will get into where you really don't want to be behind there, or where you really want to be up on the front row, out of the some of these areas here where I call this area here really dodgy. If you can help it, you don't want to be in there before the start. Anyway, we'll get onto these more detailed things later on. So if you sit your boat here prior to the race and let your sails flap and you're pointing straight up, then the wind is there. If you go head to wind there, it means the wind is coming from here. And so therefore, because your sails will flap, pull your jib back to your mast if you want. That'll tell you where you are head to wind. If you're head to wind here, in this one, then you want to sail that side of the course. That is the favoured end. Obviously, you probably want to start on starboard, but that is the favoured end of the line. So, anyone want to come in there from our experts? Anything else to add?
You can also, of course, before the race starts, if you're out there early enough, which is always a good idea, and it's something that I never do because I'm too late, is go and sail up the first beat and see which tack works better for you. And if you're on a fairly constrained place like the Thames, because the sides of the Thames and everything, and you can see where the mark is in distance, it's not too far away, you can get a general idea of which tack is getting you to the top mark quicker. And there's some other tricks that Anna and Michael could probably talk more about sailing back and forth across the line and using your sails to measure which one is actually preferable.
What else? Have we got anything there from Mike? Thanks, Ben.
Well, another thing you could do is, to Ben's point, you get a partner and get someone to leave from the port side and someone to leave from the starboard side and see who crosses first. Now, the trick on the river would be making sure that the person, is that the wind isn't, you're getting a consistent part of the wind. But in some points with so much tide, that might be one of your simpler exercises.
Absolutely. So all you got to do is have a mate who's also sailing in the race. Start at both ends, one on port, one on starboard, and just go for it. Put your hands up, shout "go" or whatever, and sail that first little reach up there. Whoever crosses first is the bias. Okay. Anything else there, Mike? What do you do? Give us a top tip from Mike. Something I've not mentioned. What do you make sure you do when you get out there?
Yeah, so it's once you've figured out the bias, one way or another, it's just about, obviously if you've decided that the pin end of the line is the one you want to start at, there's probably other people that have figured out that one as well, and it can quite often get quite busy. So it's a case of, as well as obviously you want to have the best twist on the line that you can, but it's also particularly in longer events, like a little bit of these games, so you don't need to be the most, left-hand boat bang on the pin, because that can sometimes be a slightly dangerous place to be. Whereas if you're 3 or 4 boats in from that, you still get the benefits of starting at the correct side or correct end of the line, but you don't run the risk of running out of space and being squeezed onto the pin.
Good. Now I've got for the next, we're already again at 30 minutes here, and I want to get a couple of little other things going in. I want to get some discussions going and just chuck a few things at you all. But you're looking at getting yourself a really good hole to leeward of you, to give you space to accelerate, bear away and speed up across the line. There's loads of little things that I've written down here, creating that space. looking for a hole. If you're sailing behind the fleet and looking for a hole to duck in at, port flyers, dip starts, and downwind starts, and we'll look at all that lot next week. I have got a couple of little slides here. Oh, I've gone to green screen. There we go. Getting the technology right soon. Here we go. You guys can have a little look at this again. I'm going to throw a few little bits and pieces at you now, just to make it entertaining towards the end. Have you got the It's a Rats Race slides coming up?
Yeah.
With the no barging. Just reminds me, actually, the no barging at start. When you talk about barging, I went on a barging holiday once, which was a bit weird because spending all that time just walking up and down the towpath, pushing people in the river, I didn't know what it was supposed to be about, and I wasn't allowed to go again. Anyway, we're moving on from no barging. Right, look at this one here. So, Larry is going like hell there. Larry 1, Wilma 1, that's their positions. Let's have a little look at that. Doesn't matter about where the wind's coming from in this case, although there is an arrow there. So what they're trying to say here is Larry must luff Wilma while there's still room for her to pass outside of the committee boat. Now, I've had this on around the island start for ridiculously because it's an all-day race and nobody needed to do it to me. But, yeah. Yeah, Larry, there is... Oh, hang on. What are we doing here? I've got the wrong slide up. Larry there. Okay, so at position 1, he should start shouting, Wilma, you're going to have to go up. You're going to have to go up. Yeah? Don't come down on me. Don't come down on me. To give her time to pass to the right-hand side of that committee boat. It's no good luffing her up in position 2 because you're breaking a rule, 16.1, where you're not giving her enough time to avoid collision with that boat. So you can't start luffing her up there. Now, any thoughts on that?
Does that mean you can never really do it on the river because we've got a kind of fixed edge?
Very good. We were just going to come to the river situations in a minute. Yeah, absolutely. So if you push her, well, if you give them plenty of time, yes, of course, they can tack round and jibe to come back down round to the line. But we have a bridge roughly where that committee boat is. That's our pontoon, and there's a bridge there. So if you do push them up there, what's the other thing to think about on the river? Where's the tide going?
Down the side.
The tide is usually with you. So if you push them up really late towards that pontoon, which is the committee boat here, the tide is going to take them under that bridge. Trying to spin round and get some wind in your sails set for a downwind to get out of the way again is a nightmare. Now, people do it to you too late, but in fact, you can call a protest on them if they try to push you into that committee boat too late. You've got to give them time. Anybody else on that? Any other thoughts? No? Okay. Let's have a little look at the next one. What have we got here? Lovely names here. Louise and Portia. Louise and Portia are trying to steal the holes on the line that Will and Steve were hoping to use to accelerate into fast front row starts. Well, what can we think? What do we think about this one? Anybody got anything there? So, what do the rules say about on the starting line between any pair of boats, really, and the basic right-of-way rules apply? But this is quite a typical situation where Louise here has come in flying in. Will and Steve have probably just sat on that start line, hanging around, and probably they're a bit too early. So Louise can come flying through. Okay, position 1. Oh, I haven't got position 1. I've lost that. Sorry, just one moment. If I can't show position 1 there. But position 1, Louise is clear astern of Will. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment, at that time, what can Will do to stop this flying in? Anybody? What would you do if you're in Will? Mike?
Yeah, so if you're in Will's position, the key is to hopefully see Louise coming early. You've got a couple of options really, but if you try and sort of sail down, sort of bear away slightly, just to make the gap to leeward slightly smaller, in a hope that Louise decides maybe she doesn't want to go in there, and then as soon as Louise goes off somewhere else, you can point back up to your sort of just above close hold position again.
Yeah. So position 1, Will has the rights. Louise has to keep clear of Will. He can bear away and change course in either direction. Once Louise gets to position 2, she's now overlapped with Will, and now she has the rights. Okay. Yeah. So what is rule 12? Oh, here we go. I've got reverb again. Sorry about that. Okay, so Louise gets the right of way. However, as soon as she gets the right of way, you've got to give him a few seconds to keep clear. You cannot really, at that time, once you're overlapped, change course and luff him up to make the. You've got to give him a few seconds to get away to keep clear. Okay. So if she was to luff up at position 2, she'd break a rule, because Will was to luff up again as well. His stern had probably hit her. So when she gets to position 3, then she can do whatever she wants. So there's loads of different rules in here. Yeah. So Louise can then luff Will up, but she's going faster. She's going to fly over that line. Will, you're right, Mike, could have tried to close the gap when he had a chance to stop her doing it. Okay, so what's Portia doing here? I mentioned earlier that creating room to leeward is really important. So she wants to go in. So Steve is probably sat there thinking, oh, I've got loads of room. This is a great position to be in. I can sail fast. I can bear away, speed up, or foot off, if whatever you want to call it, to get some speed to get over that line. Portia's come flying in and tried to close it down. Okay, because she wants that space there. So as she's on port tack coming in, she's got no rights. As soon as she then tacks, she's got no rights again until after she's passed head to wind. And she's close hauled again. Okay, so she's still got to keep clear until she's close hauled. If she wants to do it, then that's great. She's trying to force him to remain in the position he's in, but she's got to get right of way first of all by bearing off close hauled. Yeah, and then she can luff up again and stop him and slow him down, push him up to wind, and then she's got loads of room off to leeward. Okay. Yeah. What can Steve do as she's coming in? I think Anna answered that question. She can shout, can't she? She can shout, I'm close hauled, keep clear. On starboard, I'm close hauled, you can't push me up.
He can push you up to close hauled, you just can't push you through the wind.
That's right.
What Steve can shout is not too much. He basically can't do that much.
No, he's a bit stuffed.
Once she's there,
yeah,
he needs to keep clear. He can't tap because of Louise. The best he could hope for is to try and scull up to windward.
Yeah,
try and convince Portia to go for the line.
Yeah, so you'd bear away, wouldn't you? Really early before, as you saw her coming, bear away early to try and to stop her coming into that gap. That's it, before she's got any rights.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, that is quite hard. It takes a wee while to get the hang of doing that without accidentally sailing off 8 boat lengths down the line. So,
Yeah,
particularly in the river, I don't think if the tide's coming downwind, you spend a lot of time sitting behind the start anyway. And in yachts, you would never be completely stopped. So you'd have to consider whether it's worth it not having that room to bear away just before you begin, or losing some of your height on the line.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I've got some, we'll look into these kinds of things in a lot more detail. I'm just trying to throw a few things in at the moment. Let's just go back to then what would happen here, Ben. I'm looking at you at the moment, Ben, where we're looking at the river. So we're on the Thames. So I'll start this one off. What's the difference between the Thames and most normal race courses, which is quite an interesting thought. The wind follows the river, so we're mostly upwind, downwind. What else?
Tides, rowers, pontoons, lots of obstacles everywhere.
Walls, trees that have been cut down.
Mm-hmm.
All of those different things come into play. So again, I think I drew the river last week. There's Hammersmith Bridge. And we go all the way up and round there. And there's an island here. Our start line is here with a pontoon.
Mm-hmm.
And trees. So we can't go around this side if we get stuffed. We can't go around the pin end if we get stuffed in any way. Mm. So the winds predominantly are from the southwest. Mm-hmm. So they're here. So totally different set of things to look at, guys. Let's say we've got a marks. It doesn't matter what. I'll put these in a different color if I can. We've got a 4 in here. We've got a 3 in here. There's a 1 here, 2 there. These are all the types of marks we can have. So whatever our course is, let's say we've got a 6. So we're going all the way up the beach to 6. Going round that, we're coming back down the river. We've got to go across to 3, and then we're going to go 1 and finish. The difference here that Ben has just been mentioning, the wind follows the river, so it may well be blowing here at this point, southwesterly. So what's that going to do? There's no wind here, is there? Normally. Is it in the lee? Can the wind get to it because of all the trees all along this bank? Well, the wind, as it comes right here, follows the river, the path of least resistance. So we're mostly upwind, and then when we get up to the top up here and turn around, we're downwind all the way home. But we've got an island here, which will create a lee in the back here, definitely. There will be a lot less wind here. We've got high banks in different places. So here we've got banks all over the place. So if the wind is, some wind's coming across here, down lower where the river level is, we've got very little wind here because our sails are sheltered by the banks. So only the top part of the sail is getting it. Whereas out here in the middle, we've got more wind. So there are favoured sides, there are shifts on the bends, wind shadows. Tide in the centre is the big one, I would have said, Ben.
Yeah, right. It's worth mentioning, actually, because on the chat, Kenneth asked earlier about bias, and Anna quite correctly pointed out, it's not just the angle of the windward mark to the line, it's the other conditions on the course, favourable side, more wind, obstacles, other boats, all other things. So if you look at that top mark on the right-hand side, that's not 90 degrees, of course, to the start line. And the wind does change round, but the tide is so strong in this, on the Thames and in our particular race course, that actually that becomes a massive factor. So if it's generally sensible to start on starboard, you would find a lot of the boats, particularly the laser sailors, love to have a cup of tea and a shouting match just down at the pontoon, just south of your green arrow, and all start on starboard. And that's great. That's the favourable point to fly over the line. Then you've got the biggest, without having to tack, the biggest leg it up to the windward mark. But it's favourable to be in the middle of the river with the tide. If the tide is coming in, left to right as much as possible. So a number of factors come into play. One, you want to be on starboard. You want to have to tack as little as possible, and you want to be in the middle of the stream, and you want to have clear air. So quite often, and I do this badly, I normally get caught up with the lasers having some sort of ding-dong in their maelstrom. But in an ideal world, you would be on starboard, just below them, and you'd be in clear air in the middle of the river with the tide, and you'd fly down, and they would have their shouting match, and you would sit in the stronger stream, and the tide would pay dividends.
Absolutely. So the river is very, very different there. We will have one session on just how you set up for different winds and what you're going to do. Simon Hills is going to get together with me and talk about sailing the river courses in different wind conditions. Bit jealous there, Ben. You got a glass of red? But guys, I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
There's a little
Thanks,
bit
guys.
in there. Again, if there's something that hasn't been answered, do just chuck me a little email, because we'll either make a whole show out of it, because it could be a brilliant question, or we'll get onto it again as we go around the course. Okay?